Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. So my name is Rachel Stevenson. I am an emergency manager with the state of Colorado, and I am a geospatial scientist with them, and I make maps of wildfires and floods. Um, and um, every disaster, there is there is critical infrastructure impacts, right? Um, sorry. Uh, Right. So whether or not all of us have probably been impacted by a natural disaster of some sort, whether that is like a wildfire or a flood, a mudslide, a rock slide, a tornado, a tsunami. Um, all of us, regardless of what country we come from, have probably been impacted by a critical infrastructure, by a natural disaster that has impacted our critical infrastructure. And so if you're sitting there and you're like, well, what is critical infrastructure? Um, in America, our federal agency that is in control of our infrastructure and our cyber um, security, they're referred to as CISA, um, they define critical infrastructure as faculties and components of society that impact everyone. So we're thinking, your roads and your rail lines and your airports and the electricity that you get in your house and the cell phones that you have that use cell phone towers in order to get access to the network of cell phone data. We also, of course, have water, right? So you turn on the faucet and you get water that comes out. That is a part of your critical infrastructure. And the reason why these four that I've talked about, transportation, communications, electricity or energy, and water, the reason why these four are so vital is because they're so intertwined that if any one of them were to go offline during a natural disaster or any other type of disaster, the other three would be severely impacted, if not outright. In addition to that initial infrastructure being taken offline, the other three may also be taken offline as well. Um, so it's super important that before a disaster happens, we map all of the infrastructure that we can get our hands on so that we know where it is and what it looked like before the disaster. OpenStreetMap and the whole community, right, does a really, really amazing job of hosting mapathons and various entities and they kind of bring people together, at least we do here in Colorado, get people together and we introduce them to OpenStreetMap. And when we introduce them to OpenStreetMap, we have them map very, very basic things, right? We have them map, for instance, roads. And roads are a vital piece of our critical infrastructure. It allows us to move people, it allows us to move goods and services. But if a road is closed off due to a flood, or if a road is completely closed off because there is a wildfire and it needs to be cut off due to safety concerns, all of a sudden, the people who live in that area where that road is closed are significantly cut off from other aspects and other critical infrastructure facilities, such as hospitals or pharmacies. We saw this a lot in various hurricanes during hurricane season, where very small communities who only have one road in or out were directly impacted when that road was completely cut off because it was flooded. So mapping all of this, right, mapping these roads and keeping them updated is absolutely vital to ensuring that people who work in emergency management know what was there beforehand. Knowing what was there beforehand, but also knowing what else does that road connect to. Right, so if you have a road and that road connects to a various other series of roads within the network of transportation, within the network of roads, but that one road is vital for you getting to a hospital, we need to be able to give you instructions for how to reroute within your community, or what other ways you can use to get to that hospital or pharmacy or school that may have become a shelter, right? All of those things are really important. Um, in addition to knowing like what was there before, we also kind of have to know who is impacted, who is cut off. And so not only having the roads, but also having those building footprints, right? And being able to say, okay, all of these residents within a 1 mile radius of this road are completely cut off from this hospital or this grocery store or this resource. And that helps emergency managers be able to move resources and be able to kind of fill that gap until that vital piece of critical infrastructure can be fixed. Here within the United States, our critical infrastructure is really old and it's not being maintained well. And so being able to map it, being able to know what was there before a disaster is absolutely vital. When infrastructure is impacted either due to neglect or when it's impacted by a disaster, by a natural disaster. So a couple of things. I don't know if anybody in the room is associated with the humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, but I would like to give a shout out to the humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. These folks do amazing, amazing work during disasters to map out and make sure that emergency managers have accurate data in order to understand what was in the vicinity of a disaster that they are responding to. So they do a lot of really great work. I'm a big fan of the work that they do, and if I had more energy after doing and dealing with my own emergencies, I would contribute more. That being said, I do want to talk a little bit about, as I'm wrapping up, I do want to talk a little bit about getting involved. And so kind of two things come up. If you are interested in helping and making sure that critical infrastructure is on the map, there is a way to do this properly, right? So if we're all familiar with the LA fires, those are still kind of going on. They're still responding to them. They're still getting them under containment. And so now, right now is not the time to go in and reach out to the humanitarian OpenStreetMap team and say, hey, I would like to help. They're busy. Don't reach out to them. But if you are very much interested in helping with the infrastructure of LA and seeing what roads and seeing what buildings are being impacted by these fires, just go to your whatever platform you use, whether you use the web browser to access OpenStreetMap, or if you use any other tools like JOSM, use whatever normal traditional tools you would use on a regular day before the disaster occurred. Use those tools to map out those resources. After the disaster, right after things have sort of been handled, if you really are interested in reaching out to the humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, I would strongly recommend you do that. They're a great group of folks. They could probably very much use your help. I strongly suggest you do that before the next disaster, right?
1 minute.
That way they have time to give you, thank you. That way they have the time to give you that tutorial and that kind of overview of what they do. Thanks so much for listening. I appreciate it.